We've all felt it, that dreaded, awkward silence when your story just doesn't land. It's uncomfortable. But here's a shocker, over 60% of people admit they often tune out of conversations because of boring stories. That means most of us are missing the mark without even knowing it. Even worse, studies show that audiences only remember 25% of what they hear. So, how do you make your stories stick? How do you avoid those painful, silent moments? In this video, we're going to uncover some surprising strategies that most storytellers never think about. From turning awkward pauses into suspense to breaking the rules of traditional storytelling, we've got you covered. You'll learn how to make even the most ordinary moments feel extraordinary. Ready to never let your stories fall flat again? Let's get started. Chapter 1. Embrace the silence. Turning awkward moments into gold. First, let's get one thing straight. Silence isn't your enemy. It's actually a tool most storytellers overlook. Think about it, silence creates space. It gives your audience time to process what you've said. Studies show that people only remember 30–40% of what they hear. Giving them a moment to digest your story helps it stick. The next time you feel that uncomfortable pause creeping in, don't rush to fill it. Instead, embrace it. Use that quiet moment to let tension build. One of the masters of this technique was Alfred Hitchcock, who famously said, "There is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation of it." Awkward silences create that same anticipation. So, how do you do it without making the room feel uncomfortable? Try pausing after a key line. Let your audience feel the weight of it. When you break the silence, it will hit harder. You can also practice intentional pauses. For example, tell part of your story, then stop. Let your audience wonder what's coming next. That moment of suspense will keep them hooked. Chapter 2. The Secret Weapon. Vulnerability is a storytelling superpower. People don't connect with perfect stories. They connect with real ones. This is where vulnerability comes in. Brené Brown, a well-known researcher, explains it best. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. It's also the key to great storytelling. When your story hits a flat spot, don't panic. Instead, share a moment where you felt uncertain or embarrassed. Chances are, your audience has felt the same way at some point. Studies show that people are more likely to trust someone who shows vulnerability. In fact, a 2013 study found that leaders who show vulnerability are perceived as more likable and approachable. A good way to incorporate vulnerability is by sharing personal stories that didn't go as planned. Maybe your story fell flat, or maybe you made a fool of yourself at a party. Tell it. Make it a funny or reflective moment, and your audience will connect with you on a deeper level. Remember, it's not about oversharing or turning your story into a therapy session. Vulnerability is about showing your humanity, not unloading your burdens. Keep it light, relatable, and something that brings the audience closer to you. Chapter 3. The Rhythm of a Story. How to avoid the flat line. A story is like a song. If the rhythm is off, it loses the listener. That's why understanding the pace of your story is essential. A study in psychological science found that people's attention spans are naturally drawn to shifts in rhythm and energy. The key is to vary your pace and tone to keep your audience engaged. One simple way to adjust your rhythm is to change the length of your sentences. Short, punchy sentences create energy and excitement. Longer sentences slow things down, making moments feel more thoughtful or suspenseful. This technique keeps your audience's attention because they don't know what's coming next. Take a cue from musicians. A good song doesn't stay at the same tempo the whole time. It builds, it drops, it surprises. Do the same with your storytelling. Start slow, build tension, and then speed up for an exciting climax. Also, don't forget to play with your tone. A monotone delivery is one of the fastest ways to lose your audience. Studies suggest that varied vocal tones are 68% more likely to keep listeners engaged. So, inject excitement, wonder, or even sadness into your voice. Your energy will be contagious. If you're enjoying these tips so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more ways to up your storytelling game. Chapter 4. The power of silence. Mastering the pause for dramatic effect. Here's the thing, not all silences are awkward. Sometimes, silence is the most powerful part of a story. Studies show that well-timed pauses can increase the impact of a message by up to 30%. It's not just about what you say, it's about when you don't say anything at all. Think of a pause like a spotlight. It highlights the moment, giving your words more weight. A good example is the famous orator Winston Churchill. He often paused mid-sentence, forcing his audience to hang on to his every word. He knew that silence could speak volumes. So, how do you use silence without making things weird? First, practice pausing after key moments in your story. Did something surprising or profound happen? Pause. Give your audience a second to absorb it. For example, if you're telling a funny story, let the punchline land. Then, let silence give the laughter space to grow. Another tip is to vary the length of your pauses. A quick pause adds emphasis. A longer pause creates tension. Play around with both to see how it changes the energy of your story. Remember, silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a powerful tool that can make your storytelling unforgettable. Chapter 5, The Anti-Formula. Breaking free from cliché storytelling structures. There's a common formula that a lot of storytellers follow: setup, conflict, resolution. It works, sure, but it's predictable. If you want to stand out, break free from the formula. Shake things up. Research shows that our brains are wired to seek novelty. In fact, a 2016 study published in Neuron found that unexpected events activate the reward centers in the brain. The best way to do this is by challenging traditional storytelling structures. Instead of starting at the beginning, start in the middle of the action. Or tell your story in reverse, revealing the conclusion first. Quentin Tarantino does this in his movies all the time, and audiences love it. Why? Because it keeps them guessing. You can also play with perspective. Tell your story from a different point of view, maybe from a side character or even from an object's perspective. This can add a layer of intrigue and make your story feel fresh and exciting. Another great technique is to break the fourth wall. Address your audience directly, like they're a part of the story. This not only draws them in but also breaks the monotony of traditional storytelling. Remember, people crave stories that surprise them. Give them something they haven't heard before, and they'll stay hooked. Chapter 6, Unlikely Heroes. How to make the mundane magnificent. Here's a secret: you don't need a dramatic life to tell great stories. Even the most ordinary events can become captivating when told the right way. It's all about how you tell the story. A 2019 study from Stanford found that stories with vivid details are 22 times more memorable than those without. So, how do you make the mundane feel magnificent? Start by focusing on the details. Let's say you're telling a story about going to the grocery store. Instead of saying, "I bought some apples," you could say, "I picked up the reddest, juiciest apple I've ever seen. It looked like it was glowing under the store lights." See how that adds color? Humor is another powerful tool to make the ordinary feel extraordinary. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld built an entire career on this. He takes everyday situations, like getting coffee or finding parking, and turns them into hilarious stories. It's all about finding the quirks and exaggerating them just enough to keep things interesting. And don't be afraid to play with exaggeration. Sometimes, it's okay to stretch the truth a little, as long as it enhances the story. Hyperbole adds a sense of wonder and can turn even the smallest event into a larger-than-life experience. The key is to look for the extraordinary in the ordinary. When you start noticing the details, humor, and quirks in your everyday life, you'll find that great stories are everywhere. If these tips helped you see storytelling in a new light, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on future content.